Hello, Barry. What time is it?
I think it's time for Across the Pond, Chad.
Pond, across the pond with Barry and Chad. It is indeed time for Across the Pond. It's our weekly episode. We are finally here, Barry. I rolled out of bed this morning, literally rolled on the floor, somehow found my way into the seat because how dark it is outside. I feel like I'm that guy that is just waking up the neighbors. I feel like I should still be in bed.
So that time of year, Chad, where you're getting up and you feel like, oh, do I really want to get out of bed? You push that snooze button again and again and again because you don't have that sunlight streaming in. And so I feel for you, dude. I feel for you. Right this side, we have lots of sunlight. And so 5 a.m., 5:30 a.m., it's coming through the curtains. My curtains aren't that good at blacking it out. So it's kind of a natural alarm for me, Chad.
That's great. You're in tune with your circadian rhythm. There's nothing better, Barry, than being woken up by the sunlight. So I bet you've done it all this morning. You've gone out for a long run. You've eased into the day, or am I overstating things?
You're actually 100% right, Chad. I went to the gym this morning. I got my lifting in, did a little bit of running and some rowing, which was really good. Nice. Came back, had a nice shower, did some work, got ready for the show, and now I'm ready to tackle the rest of Sunday with all the vigor that I've got.
Oh my gosh, you're just making me feel like I'm failing at life, Barry. Waking up at sort of 7:30, have done nothing at all. But anyway, it's okay. We will get to summer eventually. And I'll find my way into that groove again. Let's chat about the week that was.
Let's do it, Chad. Let's do it.
The week that was.
So why don't I kick off this morning, Chad, while you're warming up those vocal folds and getting into the swing of your Sunday morning. And we're going to start with something on this side of the pond. A very interesting story, in my opinion, because it's something I didn't expect to see, but it looks quite fascinating. And basically, there's a grocery store here in South Africa called Checkers, a very, very popular store. It's very widely spread across the country. It's very, very popular with a lot of the country. And it's very much a kind of a discount grocery store. It's not a Woolworths. It's not trying to compete with the guys who are right at the top of that food chain. They're selling much more reasonably priced stuff, and it's kind of for your ordinary South African. And I for one do a lot of my shopping there. It's a really, really nice kind of store, and it's really, you can find them absolutely everywhere. And they are trying to compete in a brand new market, Chad. They are trying to compete against the giant that is Woolworths, which is kind of the upmarket retailer here in the country. And they've opened up what they're calling a Fresh X store, which is like a new brand of stores they're bringing out, which are much more higher market. And they've opened their very first one in Rosebank Mall. And Chad, let me read out some of the things that are part of this grocery experience, because it's way more than just a grocery store. So let me tell you about some of these things. They've got a honey bar where they're selling like artisanal honey. They've got stone-baked pizza you can order straight out of the oven from the middle of the grocery store. There's a sit-down sushi bar in the middle of Checkers, which is kind of crazy to say. A chocolatier bar to get like very, very fancy chocolates. They've got an in-store kawaii, which is like a smoothie and very healthy eating restaurant in the middle of the shop. They've got an in-store Starbucks, Chad, for your coffee fix when you're running through that store. And all of these things are part of this brand new Fresh X brand of Checkers stores. And it's kind of crazy in my opinion.
Yeah, that is crazy, especially because, like you say, Checkers is normally targeting the lower LSM. But that's really interesting. It's an interesting move. So is this a different named store, or does it fall within the normal Checkers brand? And also, Barry, you've made me realize that I'm missing kawaii more than I thought I was.
Oh, those kawaii smoothies are the only reason that Discovery Vitality works, Chad. So I get my smoothie every week if I do my exercise, which is it's not always the case. But yes, kawaii is amazing, and it really is one of the highlights of the week. I think that it's under the Checkers brand, as far as I know. I haven't seen the store myself, but I think it's under the Checkers brand, so it'll still have Checkers as a sign. But they're kind of calling it a Fresh X, experience, or Fresh X as almost a suffix after it. So Checkers Fresh X, I think, is how they're branding it, because they want to keep the nature of the store, but it's just a higher, like you say, a higher LSM and different kind of experience in these stores. What's been really amazing, Chad, is how many stores they've opened in recent times, right? In a year where retailers have been demolished across the board. Of course, food retailers have been relatively okay because of the essentials that they sell. But for the most part, retailers have been closing left, right, and center. But Checkers have opened 5 new stores in Gauteng in the last month. Sure. So they are expanding. They've got lots of opportunity. They've got lots of plans and strategies to expand their operations. customers. And this is one example of how they are like getting out of their comfort zone, Chad, and building something new that we didn't really expect from a lower LSM grocery store.
Really interesting. I guess if they want to really compete with the likes of Woolworths, they need to come up with some original products as well, some of their own no-name brand type stuff, and start to build that kind of quality association that we do with Woolworths in the way that they've done, because I think that is one of Woolworths' differentiating features.
Definitely. And that's going to be the major challenge of this, is how do you shift the consumer mindset to think of Checkers if you're in that LSM, right? Woolworths has this brand that it's like almost a status symbol here in South Africa. If you're wealthy and if you have lots of money, you do your shopping at Woolworths, and it is a kind of a status thing because of how much more expensive and how much more handmade and artisanal and free range and all those kind of aspirational things Woolworths does. If Checkers want to compete, like you said, they're going to have to find ways to compete with that. And it's going to be a difficult challenge, because to change the mind of your consumer, to make you think differently like that is very, very tough. What they have done very well, Chad, and what I've seen as being very innovative during this lockdown process, is that they've done very well with their deliveries. So right at the beginning of lockdown, when they realized that people weren't going to be keen to go into grocery stores, they opened up this 60-minute delivery anywhere in the country, basically. And so you would go into the app and you would order your groceries from Checkers, and they'd have personal buyers who'd go and collect it and deliver it to you within 60 minutes. And that was a huge innovation that we expected to see from other retailers, people like Woolworths, and that didn't happen from people like Woolworths. So Checkers have really shown that they have the guts and they have the strategies in place to try and innovate and try and change the way they are perceived in people's minds. Only time will tell if they actually succeed on that.
That 60-minute thing is really good. That's really handy to have. I'd be really curious to know what the kind of delivery charges are on that, because obviously with that service, you're asking essentially someone to go in and collect all your goods, and then obviously do the delivery. It's not just a simple delivery. Whereas I know a lot of other kind of grocery chains elsewhere in the world, like here, would have a central warehouse that would maybe even have automated bots or something collecting this bag of goods, and then you're only looking at the delivery. So what are the kind of prices like on this service?
Definitely, Chad. The delivery fee, funnily enough, is 35 Rand flat, which is a crazy cheap delivery fee and way lower than I would have expected. And so it really is a huge innovation in that perspective, and I think it's done really well. If you go to Checkers here at the moment, Chad, 90% of the people in the store are not buying for themselves. They're running around with a little phone with all their lists on, and they're getting for other people. So it really has become a huge part of Checkers' business. And so I think it's interesting to watch how the grocery stores are going to change their business models as a result of this new kind of delivery landscape, this new kind of online shopping world that's been forced by COVID, combined with this new experiential store they're trying in some of these upmarket places with these honey bars and chocolate bars. And so what you might see is that your standard grocery stores become very much delivery focused, where you've got these more higher end stores which are more experiential and kind of go beyond just going to get the list of your milk and eggs and all your basics, right? And so I wonder if that's going to be the way that grocery stores move forward, because COVID's kind of reminded us that the way we've shopped in the past doesn't have to be the way we shop going forward.
That's a really good pivot on their side, and that delivery fee is really appealing. Like, that's less than £2 on this side here. Whereas for context, Barry, if you're doing a Tesco delivery, which you need to book a slot for like a week in advance, etc., 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 I think you're paying something like between sort of £4 and £6, depending on, I guess, whether you opt for like a membership option as well. You can do that and get some sort of discount. But I mean, less than £2 in the likes of Checkers is insanely appealing. And like you say, you've got that 60-minute window. You don't have to actually prepare for this in advance and all that admin. You can kind of just do it when you want. To be honest, I have no idea why anyone would opt to actually go into a store ever again with that kind of price point.
Exactly. And Chad, also it helps to avoid the other problem, which I don't know if you have the same thing, is when I walk in with a list and I end up buying lots of stuff I didn't actually have on the list, because I walk past the chocolate aisle, I walk past the bakery, and I end up buying stuff I didn't intend to buy. Whereas if I'm on the app, I can hopefully kind of control myself and just order what I actually need. And so it actually might end up saving you even more money in that respect.
It definitely does. It 100% does. So we've switched to ordering through Tesco, basically, getting it delivered every week. just because of the amount of time that it takes. And also in London, you've got the added problem of carrying your groceries home. You don't have a car, you can't just zip it in. And so carrying heavy packets is also quite a mission. So we switched to that. But at the beginning of lockdown, Barry, because obviously now we've got the full idea of what 3 meals a day at home might look like in terms of your grocery shopping list, we were spending, I'd probably say 2 to 3 times the amount. And it also, I guess, depends on the state of your belly when you're busy shopping. You might be hungry and just grabbing more things than you need. When you're shopping online, you're looking at that running total and making decisions based on that.
It's such a bad habit that I'm in, Chad, because I live this kind of bachelor life where I live in this flat. And so I kind of wait until I have like no food left, right? You wait till the fridge is absolutely empty because I hate shopping. Yep. And then I do end up going to the shop hungry. And that's just a terrible, terrible decision to make because you end up buying so much more than you realized. And so, I think it's going to be interesting to watch how it changes consumer behavior if it happens over the longer term. And I think the Checkers, for me, are the most innovative kind of food retailer I'm seeing in the country, which is very surprising because you'd expect people, like giants like Pick n Pay and Woolworths, to be on the forefront and Checkers kind of to remain a discount shop. But they are showing that if you have the balls and the investment and you're willing to kind of try and pivot, you really can change things. And so we'll have to wait and see what happens with them in the next couple of years.
Yeah, that really is such a nice story to hear, Barry. And just to hear of all the jobs that have been created during this time that I guess has put so many people out of work is really wonderful to hear. And that's just a great story. I know in terms of this delivery service, the first retailer that I know offered it was Pick n Pay. And anyone who lives in Johannesburg would have got stuck between their little, I don't know what you call it. It's not quite a fully sized car. It's like a motorbike with a cart on the back of it, and it really is annoying when you get stuck behind one of those. But at that time, it didn't seem like too many people were keen on it. Do you have any ideas why that might have been?
I just think South Africa's culture wasn't an online shopping culture. I think a lot has changed because of COVID, and I think places like Uber Eats and those kind of delivery apps have really changed the landscape on that. But like a year or two ago, South Africans weren't buying anything online, really. There wasn't that delivery culture of order something and then come and get delivered at the gates. One of the things that makes South Africa unique is that a lot of our houses, there's a lot of security to get to actually drop something off, right? In first world countries, people can come and drop packages at the door, and it kind of is not that big of a deal. In South Africa, you're dealing with guards, you're dealing with like complexes, you're dealing with like lots of security, and so some of the deliveries have been very difficult to make because if you're not home when the person arrives, you can't really accept it because there isn't that idea of just dropping it off at the door. And so I think that's one of the reasons that South Africa has kind of lagged in this online shopping kind of world. But I think it's shifting quickly, Chad. I've certainly seen in my behavior and the behavior of the people around me that we are shifting that way. And I think COVID has kind of forced us to recognize that. And as a result, because of the increased demand, deliveries are getting better and better and more affordable, more convenient. There are tons and tons of delivery drivers going all the time. Yeah. And so I think that is a trend that's going to continue. And I think we will catch up with the rest of the world when it comes to ordering it on an app, kind of waiting for it to deliver the next day or in 2 days' time, and kind of becoming much more fair with that sort of shopping.
Amazing. Well, definitely a space to watch out on. I will definitely be interested to hear of future developments there. So in terms of obviously how COVID has affected this world, we always look at spending ability, Barry. We look at the disposable income that households have. And I guess a guilty kind of treat a lot of people do on a weekly basis is buy their lottery ticket because who knows, 1 in a million chance you might, hit the right numbers and become a millionaire. And some news coming out of that front this week.
Some really bizarre news, Chad. Something that is, I think, is quite amusing, but it's kind of caused a bit of a stir here in the country. So basically, South Africa, as most countries do, has a weekly lotto, and the prize money is significant. Like you say, it's life-changing amounts of money. And so, if you go and pay your $5 or whatever it is to buy a lotto ticket these days, and you kind of you pick your numbers, and there's 1 to 49. You got to try and figure out, cool, which ones I'm going to go for. Am I going for my birthday numbers? Do I have a favorite number? Like, what is the strategy? This week, Chad, the winning numbers were, listen to this, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and the Powerball was 10. So it sounds ludicrous that of 1 to 49, the winning numbers are all in a row like this, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. What's even more ludicrous, Chad, is guess how many people actually won this lotto by picking those numbers? 20 winners this week.
Oh my God.
20 people picked 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and won themselves 5.7 million rand each. How insane is that?
I'm not surprised that 20 people won, because a lot of people don't know what approach to follow, right? So 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 is kind of just, yeah, sure, let's pop some numbers down on a page. But in terms of that being the draw, I mean, I guess technically speaking, I guess it's plausible, right? It's possible. The probability is extremely low, but let's think about a game of poker, Barry, where you've got like a straight or something. I mean, what are the chances of that happening? And it happens. So it really is interesting. I know for a long time, the South African Lottery has had all these accusations of having magnets in the balls and all sorts of weird and wonderful things. But that really is quite interesting, because technically speaking, it's possible, it's plausible, but like being realistic, what are the chances really?
But that's why I find this so fascinating, Chad, is the way we think about probability is not rational. Because if you think about it, that 5-number sequence is just as likely as any other sequence, right? Any other sequence has exactly the same probability.
Yeah.
And I think the probability is 1 in 42 million. I think that's the calculation.
Wow.
So that is the probability of that happening. But it's as equally likely for a random assortment of numbers. But just because they happen to be next to each other, our minds immediately say, there's something there. There's fraud there. There's a problem that's happened there.
Yeah.
And it's something weird about human psychology where we don't understand how probability works, right? And so everyone is calling for fraud and calling for a scam. This is just as unlikely as any other set of numbers. And that's what we don't get in our brains sometimes, because it feels so bizarre.
Yeah, you're right. Rationally looking at that random chance, I mean, 42 million. 375,000. That's just insane. But yeah, good on the 20 people who started their sequence with 5, and they decided to go in that manner. I mean, good on them. You got to take a bit of a risk, Barry. You got to have some skin in the game to actually win one of these things. How I would be very surprised, Barry, is if somebody selected one of those random options. I can't remember what it's called, where you don't know what you're going to select. You don't know what your numbers are going to be, and so you click on the auto pick. If one of those 20 was an auto pick, then I'd be very intrigued.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's going to be a lot of investigation going into this. There's been a little bit of a stir on social media, so we'll have to wait and see if anything comes of that. It's almost like the Donald Trump thing. It's like there's allegations of fraud, but no evidence so far. We'll have to wait and see what happens.
Oh, gosh. And yeah, I mean, that is an organization that for many years has had a lot of scrutiny on it, because a lot of the kind of money is supposed to go to charity, and apparently they haven't been doing their fair part on that. So, they are certainly used to having the eyes turned onto them.
Yeah, definitely. And that's what makes this so much more kind of worrying some people, is that there has been a past and there has been kind of things about this in the past. So yeah, I don't know what's the case. We'll have to wait and see. But I think it's interesting how our minds immediately jump to that. If this was any other set of numbers, it wouldn't even made the news, right?
Yep.
It wouldn't even been talked about. But just the fact that they happen to be next to each other makes us think in different ways, which I think is interesting when it comes to probabilistic thinking, which is such a key part of thinking in general, is understanding like what do odds mean and how does it actually work and how do we actually fathom what is random and what isn't. I think about the example of when you go to a blackjack table, or even better, when you go to a roulette table and you see 5 reds in a row, and then you think to yourself, it has to be black the next time. It just has to be, right? But the reality is that it's just a 50% chance. Every single roll is a 50% chance, no matter if there's been 300 reds before it. But our minds will tell us it has to be black the next time because the odds are better, but they just aren't, Chad.
Yeah, that is fascinating. I've never been able to get my head around all of the various kind of compounding probabilities, like you say, when you got rolls after another, trying to map out what you think is going to happen next. It's a fascinating state of just psychology, human psychology, I guess, and I guess a big part of gambling as well. Now, let's move on, Barry, to, you said there was something you can't fathom about that number conversation. And there's something I can't fathom this past week, and that is the release of Apple's new AirPod Maxes, which are retailing for a crazy price, Barry, of £550.
Chad, it's such an Apple move. It is typical Apple to bring out a product that is grossly overpriced, that is kind of very confusing. It's they're trying to go their own way with this thing. Their own Beats. They've got like this huge headphone range with Beats, and they've gone a completely different direction. I don't understand the name, Chad. Why would you call it AirPods as well? I don't get it. There's so much I'm confused about in this story.
In a year that seems to have been a really good year of releases for Apple, I honestly have been for every single one of the releases up to now. And we've seen, 3 releases? They've been busy, Barry. They've been really busy.
Yeah.
But I feel like tossing this one into the mix, at that kind of price range, I just have no words. It's just insane. I think it's a wrong step. It reminds me, Barry, of when they released the HomePod, which, as a device in itself, was really good. Really good sound. It was all was there for a market-dominating product. But their price point just completely went above what the market was willing to pay. And I personally think, based on the competitors that are out there in this noise-cancelling over-ear headphone space, I think that's going to happen here. I mean, hopefully I'm wrong, but I honestly think that they've overshot their price point here.
Definitely. I mean, what they're saying with this price point is that the sound quality is going to be orders of magnitude better than what's already on the market. And I seriously doubt that's going to be the case, right? So we have to wait and see like when the reviews come in about the actual sound quality. But for that kind of price, you're expecting the best of the best of the best. And you're competing in a very, very tough market, which has got lots and lots of competitors, lots of high quality products. And yeah, it's just a weird choice to make, especially when you've come out with AirPods Pro in the last kind of couple months, and it's a very, very big release for you, and you're kind of pushing people to get these AirPod Pros, and then you're now bringing out something like this, which is a bit more of a confusing project for me. So I don't get it, Chad. I don't get the case. I don't get the look. I don't know what to say. I
know. And I was watching a YouTube review video where he goes through all of the bits of all of the metrics, and on every single one in isolation, it's behind on the competitors. It's heavier. It's like you say, Barry, it's ugly. Yes, it has these detachable magnetic ear cups, which, might help once in 2 years when you need to actually change the things. But it does seem odd to base your whole design on that, once-off thing that you're going to need to replace these. I mean, are you not backing the durability of the actual ear cups? Is that what you're saying? It's just odd.
Exactly, and the design for me is the most confusing part. Have you seen the case, Chad? It looks like you're going to be carrying a handbag around. It looks absolutely ridiculous. And so for Apple, who are the number one designers in the world, unarguably, to come out with something like this, which it doesn't fold, it's not that portable, you're going to carry a handbag around with your AirPod Maxes in. I don't get it. I really don't get it.
And that case thing, Barry, as well, it's not like you have an option of using this thing. Because based on the way that they've designed these headphones, there is no on and off switch. There's no on-off switch, Barry. So for you to actually not waste your battery, you have to put it inside the case so that the magnets can pick up that it's no longer in use, and that the magnets can then put it into a sleep mode. So if you don't use the case, you're going to be paying quite a big price. But if you do use the case, you're going to be paying a really big price as well, because you're going to look terrible.
You're just stuck between a rock and a hard place, Chat. And I don't see how they're going to sell these things. Yeah. Maybe I'm wrong. Apple have proved us wrong in the past, and sometimes they are ahead of the game when it comes to setting trends. But when I look at this product and I look at what they've released in the last year, like you said, I think this is a weak kind of a response. I don't think it's going to work out the way they want it to. But then again, I've been wrong before, so we'll have to wait and see what happens, Chad.
Yeah, your point about Beats is really an interesting one. It's the same question that I had when I saw this being released, because under the Apple brand, we've only really seen, the AirPods, the ones that you're wearing, the ones that I have, which are clearly very different to what you get from Beats. Beats obviously focusing more on the audio, I guess. It's got more of a brand behind it, that Dr. Dre, good bass, punchy bass, all of that kind of stuff. But to kind of go over that and release this, I mean, are they telling us that Beats is now not as premium as a brand as what they had kind of previously been trying to convince us it was? What does this do for Beats?
Yeah, it's a question I've been asking myself, because ever since they bought Beats, I don't think that they've done enough with it, if that makes sense. Like, there was this ginormous acquisition, obviously like a huge brand behind it, like you say. And I I was under the impression they were going to integrate that into the Apple ecosystem and make it a real key part of their whole thing. But for the most part, it's remained very much a separate sort of entity. And this would be a great time to kind of pull the two together. And if you wanted to do proper over-ear headphones, then it would make sense to kind of pull the Beats in. And so I don't quite understand what's happening behind the scenes there. I really thought that they would do more with this acquisition. And at the moment, it kind of feels like it's still running at two separate companies and there's no real overlap. Because even the design, the thinking is very, very different in these AirPod Maxes to anything you're seeing in the Beats range.
Yeah, so true. I've had a pair of Beats headphones myself, and they're the third pair that I've had because the previous two just fell apart. So maybe that is the point. Maybe the point is, well, maybe it was a bad purchase. Maybe they're regretting slightly their move. I mean, they have integrated it somewhat. They've got those that little Apple chip in it that lets you bring it close to the device, and all those nice little integrations pull up, and it's this wonderful animation that makes you feel good. But you're right. Further than that, Barry, we haven't seen them roll out like Beats speakers in an actual Apple Mac, in the same way that a lot of companies like HP would have done with Bang & Olufsen, or we've seen various other companies with like Bose and all that kind of stuff, which, like you, Barry, I kind of expected would have happened.
Yeah, all good points, Chad. And I think we'll have to wait and see what happens with this release and see if this is a new direction Apple are going. Like you say, maybe they do regret that Beats purchase, which is a tough purchase to regret because you spent a lot of money on it. And so we'll have to wait and see what happens in 2021. Apple, of course, are always going to keep pushing the boundaries. And so who knows, Chad? Maybe we're wrong on this. We'll have to wait and see what happens. Moving on to something that I find fascinating. We'll touch on it briefly, Chad, because I know we've spent a lot of time on this segment. But basically, SpaceX had their brand new test of their rocket that they're trying to go to Mars with. The rocket is called Starship. Okay. And it's this ginormous rocket that can lift 100 metric tons, right? So it's a huge piece of equipment. And the idea is that this is what's going to be the first reusable rocket to go to the moon and eventually to Mars, which is Elon Musk's kind of long-term plan. And so they've been testing this thing, and they did one of their first public tests where they wanted to take the rocket off into the air, like do a little bit of like hovering, I think, and then come down and try and land it again. And when they came down to land, Chad, as they hit the ground, the thing exploded into a ginormous fireball. And it is a video that's been shared all across social media, and then people like it's really a crazy video to watch. So I would encourage you to go and find the video if you're listening to this right now. But even though it exploded into a fireball, Chad, they still saw it as a success. And I thought that was very interesting because before the test was done, Elon Musk tweeted that he probably thought there was a 1 in 3 chance of everything working out the way it was supposed to, right? And when it eventually exploded and whatnot, he tweeted out, "Mars, here we come," which I thought was hilarious. And then he said that success, we're not measuring success by the completion of those objectives. We're measuring it by how much we can learn. And they got a lot of training data out of that explosion that was really important for them going forward. And so it's a weird thing to think about, that you would spend millions and millions of dollars building this thing and then crash it and then be happy about crashing it because you got a little bit of extra data. But I guess it's just how rocket science works, Chad.
And it's definitely not just a PR spin on Musk, because he doesn't mind tweeting that the Tesla share price is too high. He'll be frank with us if he thought it was a failure, right? And that is really interesting. I find that fascinating. I need to go and watch that video because we've this year watched these videos of some amazing things happening, and like you say, Barry, a kind of autonomous vehicle kind of going out and returning back and landing at its very precise point. We've seen all of this stuff from SpaceX this year. So to see this kind of a change, and I suppose for all of the Elon Musk fans who do see him as this kind of god almost, would be very surprised to see this thing explode.
It's an important reminder for us, Chad, because like you say, all we remember are those success stories, right? And that's what everyone tunes in to see. But if you think about when they were first trying to get reusable rockets to land, I think they only got it right on like the 18th attempt or something crazy. So the SpaceX, there's a wonderful video online, one of my favorite videos on the internet, where SpaceX did a compilation of all of their failures in one video. So it's like 4 or 5 minutes, and you can just watch failure after failure after failure after failure. So this is just part of the game, and this is one reason why being in the rocket business is so risky and requires so much capital, because in order to kind of push the boundaries on this stuff, you have to risk crashing these things, and when you crash it's gone, right? It's finished because it explodes in a huge fireball. And so it's a reminder to all of us as how much effort has to go in order to get those people to the International Space Station, in order to reuse rockets and land them. It kind of puts in perspective just how much they've accomplished to get to where they are today. And this Mars mission is on another level completely engineering-wise, because the amount of weight you have to be able to carry, the speed you have to be able to do it to get all the way to Mars and try and land on Mars, it's like an unbelievable engineering challenge. And so it's good to remind ourselves that in order to get there, Chad, we're going to have to crash a lot of rockets.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I also came across another story this week, Barry, where I think China's trying to go to the moon again, something like that. It's always very interesting, especially when you look at the countries and this race to the moon, which I thought we were past. I thought that was all gone and done in the past, but no, China's still going.
Yeah, China always wants to be in the game, right? They're the superpower that wants to be in all these conversations, and they are throwing a lot of money at their space program.
Yeah.
And so I think for the longest time, it's been the US and Russia who've been the two competing powers when it comes to the space race. I think China want to be part of that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Barry, let's then move on to our next segment.
Stuff I found interesting.
Alrighty, I came across a story this past week that I thought was very, very interesting. And that is, Barry, wait for this, that breakdancing is becoming this new sport for the Olympics 2024 Paris Games.
Chad, when I saw this on the list, I literally laughed out loud. I thought it was amazing. I can't wait to talk about this. The Olympics has changed so much. I was thinking about, let me try and collect my thoughts and let me try and get around. When the Olympics started, Chad, back in ancient Greece, right, the whole idea was that you were going to test people's physical performance in very, very like human activities. So how fast can you run? How far can you jump? How far can you throw something? It was very much a kind of a celebration of human strength and human fitness and whatnot. I wonder if those Olympians from back in ancient Greece were to look at the Olympics today and see the huge variety of sports that are available in the Olympics. I wonder what they would think, Chad, especially with something like breakdancing coming in 2024.
Oh, absolutely, Barry. I mean, I also just think back to when we were growing up and we had all the little TV games that you would plug in with the cartridge, and you play the various Olympic sort of sports, and what that equivalent of game is going to look like for the next generation. I mean, it's going to have to be 3 or 4 editions, right?
Definitely. And everything is going to be part of the Olympics. I mean, the Olympics is this wonderful celebration of human achievements, and there's so many cool stuff. I really love watching the Olympics because you find sports that you never watch throughout the rest of the 4 years, right? Things like curling and all these interesting things that I get addicted to and fascinated by during the Olympics. And they keep adding. They keep adding and adding and adding and adding. Breakdancing, the only kind of exposure I've had to it is in those step-up movies. I don't know if you remember those movies.
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of the only exposure I've got, where you have this one-on-one dance battle and you kind of going back and forth and back and forth. So I've got no idea how you judge a breakdance competition. I've got no idea how you win. It's just fascinating that it's become an Olympic sport.
Yeah, and that, I guess that's driven behind what's been happening in the world, right? So they obviously looked towards the Red Bull World Championships, which I believe there was a final in 2019 that had 50 million viewers. And so I guess as a planner of an event, which was postponed, Barry, was supposed to be this year, they've had a bit of extra time, right? And I guess they've kind of looked inwards and looked at what's been happening around them and decided, well, actually, there's enough demand to compete on a countrywide level in the field of breakdancing.
It sounds crazy, Chad, but I think, as far as I know, they tested at the Youth Olympics in the last one, and it seemed to do relatively well.
Cool.
I saw a stat that there's 1 million people in the sport worldwide, which I find hard to believe, but that's a huge amount of people. And like you say, 50 million people watching that Red Bull World Championships. Maybe we love it, Chad. I've never watched a breakdance battle, but maybe it's insanely cool, and maybe we'll eat our words. But at the moment, it seems a little bit weird to me.
It almost feels like it's only a matter of time before we see some esports entering the arena of the Olympics too.
Has to be. Wait for the Fortnite gold medal match. I mean, it's just going to be a weird world, Chad. It's going to be a strange world.
Maybe 2027. Let's see. Okay, Barry, we've been wanting to have a conversation, and it's just been
I
a bit
did
of...
my homework, Chad. I finally did my homework. I know you've been pushing me, but I'm finally done.
Oh, well done, Barry. I mean, it's not every day that you call kind of binge watching a series of The Crown homework, but it is. It's a lot of content to get in. And I guess that detracts a lot from the other productive things that one might be doing. But it's good to take a break. It's good to step away from all that stuff and get lost in this world. And The Crown is part fact, part fiction. And it's something I guess we got to preface this conversation with, because there have been a lot of liberties that have been taken in all seasons of The Crown. Ultimately, there are some factual pieces that they kind of throw in there to make it feel like the whole thing is reality. But there are, I mean, all of the scripts that have been designed, I guess they try to make it as authentic as possible, but they do run away with a few themes. So off the bat, Barry, it's been a little while since I watched it, I think 3 or 4 weeks, so I'm going to have to get up to scratch with this topic again, get refreshed with it. But what were your thoughts?
Jed, my first thought is that it is such a good show. Like the season 4 was brilliantly shot. The scenic nature, the character development, the storyline. It is really, really one of the best shows on TV I've seen in the last couple of years. Yeah. And so it was an absolute pleasure to kind of binge it and get back into it again. I realized how much I missed it when I got stuck in again to the characters and whatnot. So first of all, it's a brilliant show. So if you haven't watched The Crown, do yourself a favor and get onto that immediately. It really is a world-class show. Yeah. The second piece of what you touched on is that how dangerous this mixing of fact and fiction can be, because for someone like me, and I think for a lot of people around the world who don't know British history that well, or don't know the royal history that well, I kind of take all of it as fact because I don't have any other frame of reference, right? And so it's very easy to run away with this idea that it's a documentary. And you have to keep reminding yourself it's not a documentary. It's a piece of fiction that is based on some sort of real-life events, but like you say, lots of liberties taken. And so I don't know how much of it is truth or how much of it isn't, but regardless, the character development and the nuance and the depth in the storyline is absolutely superb. In season 4, of course, we meet Princess Diana for the first time, and a lot of the season is based around her. But we also see the reign of Margaret Thatcher as Britain's the first female prime minister. And watching that is fascinating as well. So lots of parallels between the two characters are drawn. You see like this very, very strong and independent and headstrong kind of prime minister compared to a princess who's really struggling with mental health and is kind of all over the place in some cases and is treated quite poorly and all these things. So I find that the comparison between those two female figures to be probably the most interesting part of this season, Chad.
Yeah, it was. It was really quite the powerful, comparison that you constantly had running through this constant stream through every single episode, really. It just makes for such great viewing. And that casting, Barry, that is an ally of theirs. They really have cast all these characters so well. So straight off the bat, Barry, based on this character development, etc., what are your feelings towards Prince Charles?
Oh, Chad, the way they portray both Prince Charles, but also the whole family is as a very dysfunctional family, right? They portray the royal family as lots and lots of lonely, sad people who are stuck behind these like giant palace walls and try and make it out in public like everything is hunky-dory and everything is going well, but behind closed doors they are all miserable because they've had to choose this life of duty as opposed to a life they would have chosen if they weren't born into this family. And so I think Charles is portrayed as this figure who is kind of forced into a marriage he doesn't really want. He's in love with another woman that is also married, and so there's lots of drama there, and he's forced into this marriage, and at the beginning he seems like he's going to take on this responsibility and he's going to do what's right for the family and he's going to do it. And as time goes on, as he starts to learn about Diana and they start to spend more time together, they realize they don't actually know each other that well. And they kind of raced into this marriage that probably wasn't advised. And Diana comes in as this 19-year-old girl, very pretty, very popular with the public. And Charles feels very kind of hard done by that because he's this future king. He's supposed to be the person in the limelight. And Diana just steals all of that with her charm and her looks and the way she treats the public. And so you see this amazing combination of jealousy, of hatred of the fact that he can't marry the woman that he actually loves, this kind of fake marriage that they're trying to pull off in public, and it ends up boiling up into really, really horrible places, Chad.
Yeah, and all of that kind of molds together into a character that you don't like. Ultimately, all of these things, all of that jealousy, all that negative emotion, ultimately, I have very strong feelings towards Prince Charles as a result of watching this. Because you're right, Princess Diana, what a beautiful, kind of just sweet, wonderful kind of soul and personality. And there you have this guy who is just cold, not opening up to her, kind of not giving it a chance. Ultimately, is what it looks like. That's how it comes across in The Crown, and all of that stuff about feeling jealous about the amount of attention that she's getting, all of that kind of thing. It's just all those characteristics that, we don't want to see in a person, and certainly not the future king. We want someone who is willing to kind of stand behind his woman and ultimately revel in that kind of glory that she's getting, because ultimately in the bigger picture people are actually thinking better of him because of her. But no, you're right, the way it comes across is that he's just jealous of all that attention, and I found it fascinating. And I think it throughout the board, anyone who watched the Crown season 4, I saw lots of stuff online, lots of stuff on Instagram, and yeah, people just not happy with Prince Charles. And it's an interesting discussion, because here we're not talking about people who have passed away, we're not talking about a journey that's happened, we're talking about the future king. And I do find it a fascinating kind of discussion point. When that transition does happen, what's the perception going to be?
And that transition is soon, hey, Chad? I mean, I know the Queen seems immortal, but she's in her late 90s, and you would think that in the next couple of years, at some point, he will become the future king. Yeah. So the discussion online is, are him and Camilla going to be the most hated, king and queen ever, because of the way it's been portrayed? And so the timing of this series coming out right now, when the Queen is in her late 90s, is going to make this a very, very different discussion than it would happen if it was years away. Whereas his succession is coming around the corner. So, like you say, I don't know how much of it is true. I don't know what to make of, is that character true to who he is? We've never seen that kind of behind-the-scenes look into his real life. And so I wonder what he feels like sitting at home watching it, Chad. I wonder, how does he respond to this sort of character assassination in a way?
Yeah, and I mean, typically we get no response from the royal family. In fact, that's very much the point, right? Is that they don't express an opinion on anything. But there was an episode where we saw a departure from that, Barry, and I think this is factual, and that is when the Queen went to heads ultimately with Margaret Thatcher over South Africa's sanctions. Essentially, the apartheid regime, all of the other Commonwealth countries had entered into this agreement to impose sanctions on South Africa and try to get an end to apartheid ultimately. And Margaret Thatcher just wasn't keen on signing it off. But the Queen expressed a bit of an opinion on that front.
Yeah, it was a key kind of turning point in the season, because you began to realize that Margaret Thatcher ran on a pure economics basis. Yep. She was a very, very rational person. She didn't have the kind of emotion you would expect from a female leader. There wasn't that. It was a very cold kind of outer layer, and all she worried about was the interests of the economy and interests of the British people. And so in that episode, the Queen had to come in and say, listen, there are moral atrocities happening halfway across the world in one of our kingdoms, right? And if we don't kind of step in and do what's right, that's a moral abomination. And Margaret Thatcher was in this position where England were benefiting from the trade between the two countries, right? And economically, it was very, very tough to impose those sanctions. And so watching that debate between those two women, this prime minister who was this only female in this completely male-dominated parliament and had to become the strong, very, very headstrong person who was decisive and had to push through all the stigmas of being the very first female leader, then having to realize that empathy is needed in this case, and the Queen trying to bring that out in her, and like you say, eventually leaking the information that she wasn't happy to try and kind of force the behavior. It really was a fascinating piece of politics to watch, and that's what makes world leadership so interesting to me, and what makes it so difficult as a job, because the amount of competing interests and the amount of competing things that are coming for you at all times is crazy. And when you have a queen, and when you have a sovereign who has so much kind of power and so much responsibility for that country, it becomes a whole nother level of stakes, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, what a way to kind of learn about this history, Barry, which happened way before our time, before we were even thought about. And to kind of watch it in this way, I just think it's a great way to learn about things that have actually happened in the past. Like we said, not all of it is fact, a lot of it is fiction, but I just thoroughly enjoyed watching that dynamic play out, and the casting again with Gillian Anderson, just wonderful.
Just adding to that point, Chad, this is the only show that I've ever watched where I sit on Wikipedia the whole time, Googling stuff, right? And that's the show of how compelling the story is, and like you say, how it's actually a decent way to learn from history, because I end up watching the show and then I end up Googling. I was watching YouTube videos of Diana herself and kind of like digging into some of the history, and so that's what really good storytelling can do. It can kind of force you to like look into these things more deeply. And so I don't know of any other show that I've sat with Google on my phone while I watch.
Yeah, you're right. I haven't either, and we also do that as well. We hit pause, make sure we both kind of give a bit of Google, even compare the actual photos to the actual people, and it really is such an authentic representation that everyone needs to watch. Now, one of the other characters, Barry, that I was fascinated about, and this definitely kind of prompted me to hit pause and to bring out my Wikipedia, is a guy by the name of Michael Fagan. A guy who had lost his job, etc., etc. Things weren't going well under Thatcher's regime. He went to his counselor and complained about everything. And the guy said, well, go and talk to the Queen. And that was just said in jest because, realistically speaking, how the hell are you going to talk to the Queen? This guy actually broke into Buckingham Palace. He got his way into the Queen's bedroom, sat next to her bed, woke her up, and I think he had like 7 minutes of dialogue with the Queen. And that for me was just absolutely fascinating. When you've got the sovereign that has this palace that is guarded like 24 hours a day from all angles, and you actually have a guy break into her bedroom. I was fascinated by it.
And he broke in twice, Chad. He did it twice, which is absolutely crazy. Yeah, like you say, when it happened, I kind of went on to Google immediately because I'm like, okay, they've definitely made this part up. This is definitely part of the fiction. And it's like, no, it actually was fact. And it's one of those reminders that reality can be so much stranger than what you can think about, right? If you were to try and write a story like that, if you any screenwriting class, like this kind of story is perfect. You've got the sovereign who has all the power in the world talking to this person who's on the absolute bottom rungs of society. And that really shouldn't happen. But the contrast of the two personalities, the way he gets into the palace, everything is just absolutely perfect storytelling. And the fact that it's reality is just amazing, because you never would write that, because no one would believe that if that was like a story, right? But the fact that it's real and that you watch that happen, you see the Queen's face when she recognizes that he's at the foot of her bed, and the way he tries to handle the conversation, the way she tries to call the police, the way he tries to kind of make his point, and she's trying to kind of judge if this is a threat or not. It's a fascinating and one of my favorite scenes of the whole series so far. And watching it it's such a wonderful reminder of how leaders can get so distant and so far away from the realities of their lived experience on the ground, right? It's so easy to live in an ivory tower as a leader and kind of see things from a very bird's eye perspective. And those moments where you get to interact one-on-one with people who you are purporting to serve, and that you're supposed to be serving, those moments are absolutely crucial. And I think that's what we see in the Queen's reaction to that moment where he sees this unemployed man standing at the edge of her bed. It's crazy.
Yeah, it just is fascinating. And I mean, I'd love to know what was actually said in the room. I mean, I wonder how authentic that whole bit was. But I mean, I do see the Queen in a great light. I do think she's such a wonderful person, and I do think she would have reacted in that way. As soon as assessing, okay, there's no imminent danger, he's not going to actually hurt me. Let's give him a little bit of time, but at the same time, let's get some help on the way. And yeah, I mean, I also found it was a fascinating scene. I just loved it. And I cannot believe that it's actually happened. It just makes me want to stand outside of Buckingham Palace again and just look and kind of, how did this happen? Like, what the heck? Yeah, it's one of those things. Barry, after all of that, shall we move on to develop and grow?
Let's do it, Shay. Let's turn the mirror on ourselves.
Develop and grow.
It's the ever important topic today, Barry. And we always, again, leave it to the end of the podcast. We've been talking about maybe moving it up the order because it is such an important piece of what Across the Pond is, this kind of self-development theme. And today we are talking about something really important, Barry, which is stress management.
Yeah, definitely, Chad. I've had a very stressful couple of days on my side, and so I've been thinking a lot about this. Is how do you, in those moments of stress and anxiety, when you feel that pit in your stomach, and you feel like in one of those moods where you're just a bit all over the place and you're a bit overwhelmed by everything that's happening in your life, how do you kind of get out of that mode and to be able to make important decisions, right? Because what you don't want to do is you don't want to make big decisions or kind of make big actions when you're in that state, because you're not thinking clearly. You're kind of overwhelmed by the adrenaline and the everything that's happening around you, and it's important to be able to get away from that and manage that stress as best you can, so you can make better decisions going forward. And it's something I've been very bad at throughout my whole life, Chad. I think I've got a little bit better in my last couple of years because I've been focusing more on mental health and more on kind of taking care of myself. And so I thought I'd share some of my findings over the last couple of years. And they are all super obvious. That's the thing. They're all super obvious, but sometimes we need the reminder, because when we're in that state, Chad, we don't think like we should be thinking.
No, we don't. And I guess the first thing that, before we get into these mitigating factors or kind of things you can do, actions you can take to feel better, Barry, I think we need to address kind of recognizing where you are on the spectrum. And it's an important way to think of this. You are either, and everyone, it kind of changes all the time. You are either surviving or you are thriving, or you are somewhere in between those two extremes. And so I think you need to try and figure out where it is that you are. And once you've figured out, okay, cool, I'm actually, I'm thinking negatively about things that haven't yet happened. I'm just coping. I'm not going out there and doing things that I enjoy doing. I'm not recognizing myself. That's when you need to say, okay, cool, there's actions I can take, and these are Barry's actions that could help.
It's such a good point, Chad, especially in 2020 when so many of us have switched into that survival mode because the world has just been absolute chaos, right? And so it's a really, really practical example right now, and I think it's a really good way to bring that up. The way I think about this is I think about it as a toolkit, Chad. So you kind of open your toolbox, and ideally in those moments of extreme panic, extreme stress, extreme anxiety, you want to be able to turn to certain things that work. And the idea in my head is that you've got this mental toolbox that you're opening up, and you're going to pick something that's hopefully going to help you. The very first tool that I think is the most important, and it's the one that I forget the most, is exercise, Chad. It is amazing how I can be sitting with the absolute pit in my stomach. I can be driving myself insane for hours and hours on end. I will go for a run for 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes, I'll go for a run, and everything will just drain out of my body immediately. It is incredible how powerful exercise is. Just getting out there and sweating a little bit, getting the blood pumping, getting out of your environment of wherever you at the moment. It is an absolute game changer, Chad, and it's something we forget about when we're in those moments of stress.
You're so right. It's a wonderful gift that we've been given, really, is this ability to kind of invoke endorphins by just getting out there and doing a little bit of work. And you're completely right. Once you get back, your whole perspective to life can be drastically different. Doing an exercise session in the morning, for example, Barry, will completely alter the way your day could work. You can approach situations differently. You got more confidence. You're just feeling more positive about things. And I've certainly felt that myself as well. And in this lockdown situation, I've been struggling to get into that routine because of the fact that I have so many options. I can exercise at many different times of the day, and I've been struggling to kind of force myself ultimately to get into some sort of routine. And you're right, it's just such a powerful tool that is trusted. It works every time, and it's one that we really need to rely on a lot more.
It's so important, Chad. And like you say, it's that lead domino that affects everything else in your day. So if you can get yourself into a regular routine, and I'm not saying you have to run marathons, you don't have to lift gazillions of kgs of weight in the gym. Find something small and something realistic that you can do on a regular basis, and I promise you it changes everything. I think it's the world's best antidepressant. I think it is absolutely powerful in every instance. And for anyone who's stressed, that is the first thing in the toolkit. If you're feeling overwhelmed, get those running shoes on and go and take a walk, go and take a little bit of a jog. I promise you in 10, 15 minutes, you'll come back and you'll feel like a different person.
Yeah.
The second piece of the toolkit, Chad, is something that I'm very, very bad at, and it's something that I've had to get a lot better in the last couple of years, is that I tend to isolate myself. I've got this personality where when I'm struggling with something, I don't like asking for help. Because I feel like I've got this hero complex. I'm going to take it all on myself. I'm going to figure this out. And I try and outthink it instead of just kind of conversing with someone else and kind of bouncing the ideas off a friend. And so the second piece is talking to somebody, talking to a friend and asking for help when you need help. This is something I've been very bad at for years. In the last couple of years, I've really tried to force myself to, when I'm in those states, to talk about it to a friend, because just the act of talking to someone about it is therapeutic on its own right, and you'll feel like much better afterwards. The friend doesn't have to have the solutions. The friend doesn't have to have an action plan. They don't have to solve the problem for you. But the mere act of talking it out loud reminds you that you're not alone. And when you talk it out loud, you realize that some of the fears and some of the worries that are in your head, when they've spoken out loud, they don't sound as scary as they did, Chad.
Yeah, it's a simple one, but it's so important. It's a crucial one, Barry. And it's the reason why some people do pay for kind of professional sort of help. Obviously, there's other help that's given, but a lot of that kind of relief that I think a lot of people experience when they do go to a counselor, for example, is that ability to just have a conversation ultimately. And you've got that. You've got friends. You've got a support network. You should really count on them and make use of them. Sometimes we like to think that people will judge us, or we like to think that they'll think less of us. And in all honesty, we're all human. We all have problems. Maybe our problems are not the same, but every single person is dealing with something. And again, it's this gift that's been given to us in the kind of tribal nature, the way that we've structured our societies, is that we've got these people all around us, and they are our support network, and we should rely on them as well. So yeah, simple but really important, Barry.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we sometimes get into the trap of thinking that our friends are going to read our minds, right? Or we think that it's their responsibility to probe enough to find out what's going on in our lives.
Yeah.
And often it just takes like an honest conversation to phone up a friend and be like, listen, I'm really struggling. Here's what's happening. Please just listen to me vent for an hour.
Yeah.
And I promise you that kind of session, the friend will appreciate it, because then they know what's going on in there, because they want to help you, right?
Yeah.
The whole point of friendship is that you want to be there for someone when they're at their most difficult times.
Exactly.
But they can't read your mind. You have to be the person to say, listen, I'm struggling, I need help. And just getting over the pride factor of that and realizing that we all go through ups and downs in our life. We all go through moments of darkness and moments of joy. And we have to be there for each other in the moments of darkness. Yep. But no one can help you if you don't kind of raise your hand and actually talk to somebody. And so that's something I'm trying to do in my life, and I think for a lot of people out there, it's something to focus on when you're in those moments of stress.
Definitely, and I think any kind of worthwhile friend that's worthwhile to have in your arsenal is one that is there in good times and bad. We've all had those friends that just want to only rely on us when things are bad, and then when things are good, completely forget about a person. But those friends who are there in good times and bad are those that we can always count on. And not necessarily every single one of your friends is going to fill that role. There are friends who are only there for the good times, and I guess it's important to know which is which. And just make sure that in your support network you do have some people, even if it's just a handful, that you can rely on when things go bad.
Without a doubt. The third part of my toolkit, Chad, well, I don't know if it's my toolkit, but a toolkit is breathing and meditation.
Yep.
In those moments of extreme anxiety, extreme stress, your heart starts to race, the adrenaline starts to fill your body, and you feel physically kind of all over the place and physically overwhelmed. Yep. And that is like a natural response that has been built into our human biology, because back in the olden days, you'd be chased by a lion and you needed to have that adrenaline to be able to get away from the lion, right? And that's kind of where it comes from. But in the modern world, you're not trying to outrun lions, you're trying to outrun your own thoughts. And those are much harder to outrun because you can't escape them. And so one of the techniques that has been very popular in the last couple of years and is super powerful, but very, very difficult to do, is in those moments to take a breath, to actually sit down and take some deep breaths. If it's for a couple seconds, if it's for a minute or so, and that deep breathing will actually help to lower the levels of adrenaline in your system and bring that physical reaction of stress down so you can handle things more rationally. So the meditation is kind of a more regular practice where you kind of set up, cool, every single morning I'm going to try and do 5 to 10 minutes of meditation, and the benefits there are immense, and lots of people will swear by it as kind of keeping them mentally stable throughout their weeks. But the breathing in the moment is also important. So regardless of what you do meditation-wise, if you're able to recognize when you're in one of those states of extreme stress, and I know Apple's got a little breathing thing on their watch and whatnot, but taking a minute to do 3 deep breaths, I promise you the difference you'll feel is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, you're so right. It's that biology that ultimately is the result of us being in fight or flight mode far too many times in a day, honestly, a deadline will pass or an email will pop up that we don't expect, and all of a sudden it triggers that response. But you're right, we have this mechanism that allows us to control it in a way, and yes, it does take a few seconds. Yes, you might feel like you're being a bit ridiculous, but that's fine. No one needs to know you're doing it. Just sit quietly, slowly kind of control your breath, because I don't know about you, Barry, I have days where I get to the end of the day and I realize that my kind of breathing rhythm is just off. I'm just breathing in this like completely weird rhythm. And that really affects my kind of mental state, weirdly enough. So I guess kind of the meditation part of it is kind of setting your rhythm, making sure you're kind of waking up from sleep where you're not actively thinking this really important thing that keeps us alive, ultimately, our breath, and making it an area of focus, really, which for a lot of people, it kind of just becomes this mechanism for keeping us alive, rather than this really powerful tool that can control all these emotions and all of these hormones that flow through our body.
Without a doubt, I've been very inspired by the work of Wim Hof, who's kind of known as the Iceman, and he's got a lot of work on breath work and trying to improve the way you breathe, because we don't think about it like that. We think it's kind of just something that happens in the background. We don't think about it directly, but it really is a muscle. And like you say, in 21st century life, we tend to breathe very shallow throughout the whole day because there's just all these dopamine hits and these interactions, and then we're distracted all the time, and there's anxiety that builds up and whatnot. And we get to the end of the day, we realize we've been breathing shallow the whole day. And so what meditation and what this breath work tries to do is try to teach your body that deep breaths. The deeper the breath, the more oxygen you get to your brain, the better you're going to feel and the better decisions you're going to make. And so it's something that's worth focusing on if you find yourself in those situations. But even if you're doing well and if you're in a good space, it still is a good exercise to get into, because it's the breath of life. Like, there's a reason it's so foundational to the human experience. It's not just something that happens in the background. It is everything that fills you up and gives you the energy and the vitality to actually take on the world.
Yeah, absolutely. So important, Barry. And actually, while you're listening to this, wherever you are, whatever position you're in, if you're driving in your car, if you're sitting down on the couch, whatever it is, think about what your current posture is. And this is something that I came across this past week, Barry, and it's also really important, because if you're hunched over, your rib cage doesn't get the chance to expand. And what you're actually doing is you're kind of limiting the amount of breath that you can take in. And so if you think about people who drive kind of hunched over, and when you start to feel a bit sleepy while you're busy driving, it's because not enough oxygen is getting to your brain. Now, yes, sometimes if you're on just a long highway, it can be a little bit boring. But I honestly think a lot of the time, because of the position you have to be in when you're driving with your hands extended out to the front and you're kind of hunching over a little bit, you're not able to breathe all of that air in that you should be able to. And so if you feel that as well, just kind of take note of your posture. And I also think that's quite important as well.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I think for so many of us who work in front of computers as well, that posture is so, so crucial. When you're sitting hunched over the computer and you get that email of the boss who's screaming at you for something, you have a real physical response, right? And if you're able to kind of fix that posture, take a breath before you respond with all caps to your email, kind of take that moment to just kind of breathe, you're going to make much better decisions. And at the end of the day, it's this 21st century where we think we have to rush everything. We think everything has to happen at 1,000 miles an hour. And focusing on your breathing for moments during the day just reminds you that, okay, it's okay to just be a human being for a second, right? It's okay to just sit, breathe, extend, stretch a bit. Those little moments are what adds up to be able to manage stress across a day, across a week, across a lifetime.
Can I tell you something else I've been doing this week, Barry? That's also really simple, and I don't know if I would recommend it necessarily, but it's helped with me a bit with stress management this past week. And that is like taking my watch off. I this week have not had my watch on because I myself, my personality, I invoke stress in itself, knowing that I have not been productive. So I look at the time constantly. I look at this time window and I think about all this time that I've lost. Where, actually I work a full-time job and actually my free time should be spent resting, like doing things I love, not aiming for, productivity goals. And although it sounds really simple and it is maybe a bit silly because maybe I've been late for one or two things, I've just not had my watch on me all the time when I'm in the shower, when I'm, just doing things, looking at the time, looking at all this time that I'm wasting in inverted commas, which I thought has been quite interesting too.
I really like that, Chad. I really like that. It almost reminds me of that idea of kind of leaving your phone at home and kind of going into nature and getting away from the screens and away from all the external inputs, because all the screens and everything we wear, the watches specifically, notifications are coming in. And like you say, the time is there and there's all this incoming stuff. And it's nice to be able to take that off and kind of get away. I think another good way to do it is to kind of take a nice long bath and put some music on and put all your screens away and just spend some time just with yourself without anything else. That can be really powerful as well. So thanks for that tip. I must try the watch thing. That sounds like a good way to go.
Yeah, hopefully you don't miss as many deadlines or whatever the case is. But I mean, I enjoyed it, especially with the notifications, the evolution of what the watch has become, Barry. I think that's the whole thing. It's constantly tracking every movement, every heartbeat, all of that stuff. And it's sometimes a little bit too much data, a little bit too much information. So it's helped me certainly. Great place again to end a jam-packed episode. We had a lot more to talk about, but we are bound by the limitations of time. This watch is a great reminder of that. But we'll obviously move that over to next week. But it's been a great episode anyway, Barry.
It has, Chad. I've really enjoyed it. It's been really good to chat. And you've come alive throughout the podcast. So I'm glad to see if you're now back into your Sunday. And it's been really, really good. Episode 56 in the bag. I really love doing this. I always say this, but I can't stop myself. It's really a lot of fun making these podcasts. And thank you for listening and watching. If you made it this far, you're a legend. Thank you very much. As always, do check us out on all social media platforms, on Twitter @across_podcast, Instagram @acrossthepondcast, and Facebook Across the Pond Podcast. As always, recommend us, please, to any of your friends who might enjoy listening to us. We want to, reach as many people as possible. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week. Pond across the pond with Barry and Chad. Hello, Barry. What time is it? It's time for Across the Pond. It's time for Across the Pond. Oh, sorry. I just wasn't ready. I think it'll work. Sorry. Oh, shit. Oh, come on. Okay, we'll get there. Yeah. If you don't mind. There seems to be more of a lag than usual. Yeah, there is. On Zoom. Should we... Maybe I'll stop sharing the screen. Hello. 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 I'm just putting the okay. Putting the LAN in. Because that'll probably help. Okay, let's see how quick the exchange is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, okay. 11. They need to start coming up, I suppose, with a really... Oh, sorry. Like, I'm still clearly very much sleeping. They really want to compete with Woolworths. So what are the kind of prices like on this service? Okay, I need to Google that. Hold on. I love how you teed it up, and then you pour like you got it, so that when it comes, it'll look like you. So that you can edit it. It looks perfect. Yeah, exactly. I love it. This feels so inauthentic. Oh shit. Depending on how much you have, and not that. 4 and 6 pounds. Often, I think one of the... What is the company that I'm thinking about? Oh, what's the company, man? I had... Yeah, definitely. So sorry, am I drawing too much out of this? That doesn't have much... No, it's all good. I just don't have to leave. But what's quite cool is that Elon Musk still sees it as a success. Oh, as a plan of this event that, I suppose
we've been waiting for. Fuck, what am I trying to say? Was it postponed? What was postponed again? I'm so in a rock.
Olympics was postponed.
It was 2020, wasn't it?
Duty over a life of that they actually would have chosen in without that. Oh, just across
Sorry, my battery's. There we go. Here we go. Can we be back?
the red lights. Okay, it's back now.
Thanks.
And like you said, there's lots of discussion about are him and Camilla going to be the least.
There's another guy, and another. Oh, sorry.
I just want to add one more thing there.
Shall we turn our eyes inward and talk about ourselves a little bit?
You're missing a whole segment, Chad.
I know, but we've got too. There's just too much. I think we're gonna have to
Okay, so we're going to move that to next week.
Yeah, I think so, bud.
Okay, cool. Cool.
If that's okay.
Yeah, of course. Likewise, Chad. Oh, why am I saying likewise? That's stupid.
Okay, are we gonna do a one take again?
No, don't put that pressure on. That was a unicorn, Chad. What we accomplished. That was a unicorn. Okay. One take.
I mean, we don't have to. We can try, but.
Okay.
Talking about upper levels, we are very confused by Apple's new release of the AirPod Max. The price point just is dumbfounding. Oh, damn it. Sorry, man.
It's all good.
Sorry, I crushed our dreams. Too much pressure.